This video is part 3 of Baptist business meetings. The previous videos discuss how to deal with how to conduct business meetings in a Baptist church. This one should be a shorter video than the other two. We're going to pick up where we left off, which was with the discussion of postpone, refer, and table delaying a decision. I want to start off with this topic of tabling a motion. This is, and the reason I want to start here is because this is what a lot of people think of when they want to postpone a motion, or they want to end discussion of a motion and basically just not handle the motion. And people think, well, we can just table it and it goes away. And so what happens is people handle these things improperly. A motion to table actually just requires a majority, and which would be a bad idea for just the majority to be able to decide whether we vote on a motion or not. And so it's not good to use a motion to table as the way to dispose of a motion, especially in cases where that motion requires more than that. Some motions may require 2/3, and some may table or move to table the motion, and that would only require a majority. And so we should not allow that to be used as a means to get rid of a motion. To table a motion means to put it aside temporarily so that another motion can be considered. And as an example, I give it, maybe we have a motion for on the annual budget. Maybe the Finance Committee has come in, they made a recommendation that we adopt the annual budget. And so that motion is pending. There may be a lot of discussion about that. There may be a lot of amendments being made. There may be various motions going on. And then we reach a point where people are getting hungry and somebody decides, we really ought to order pizza. And we ought to break for lunch and we ought to just serve pizza and then we can pick this up afterwards and something like that. So someone decides that's a great idea. They want to make that motion, but they can't make that motion. It would not be proper to make that motion while this motion to adopt the annual budget is under consideration. So because we want to make that motion, we make a motion to table the annual budget. That will allow someone to make the motion to order pizza, which if it's approved, you go, someone orders pizza, and then you would pick up the motion on the annual budget again. You'd continue your discussion. It should not be a way to delay to the next meeting or to kill a motion. It's not a debatable motion. It's just a way of laying something aside temporarily while so we can handle something else. Motion to refer to a committee. This delays the final decision motion in a different way from others. And the decision is actually, it's passed off to a committee. The committee comes back with a recommendation. You could have this, there could be several meetings that occur between, several business meetings that occur between the time it's referred to them and when they come back with a recommendation. It could be a case you have a motion that has a lot of discussion, and rather than having everybody sitting there while 4 or 5 people are discussing what to do with it, you just refer to the committee and use those 4 or 5 people as the committee, they can go off, discuss that, come back with a recommendation, and then everybody else can vote on it without much discussion. And so it helps to move things along, but it does delay the motion for a little bit. It puts it aside, but it puts it into the hands of the committee. It does not kill the motion or prevent the church from taking it back from the committee at will. You can refer something to the committee, and then the church at a later business meeting, maybe the church decides that we shouldn't have done that. We want to vote on it without the committee coming up with something. Maybe the committee's taking longer than what we think they should, so someone may make a motion that we bring it back from the committee, and so you could do something like that. We have the motion to postpone. This is really what most people are thinking of when they think of the motion to table. Postpone just lays it aside. The motion to postpone indefinitely effectively kills the motion without a vote for or against the motion. This motion is debatable. So someone may make a motion that we postpone this indefinitely. They really don't want to consider the motion any longer. And so they bring this up. Of course, you could have a motion to postpone indefinitely, and you could have a motion to, you could immediately have a motion to, they could immediately move the previous question, which would bring, since the motion is not debatable, if that motion is approved, then you could have it would bring this to an end fairly quickly. So there are ways around that, but the motion to postpone indefinitely is debatable. So the debate on the motion would continue even with a motion to postpone indefinitely. But a motion to postpone indefinitely would require 2/3 vote. Motion to postpone until a specific time, until the next meeting, delays consideration, moving it into unfinished business. So those would basically say, we're done with consideration of it right now. We want to move on to some other things, and so they postpone to some other time, and when that time comes up, then the debate would continue. Then we get into voting in elections. This is a way of finding out what everyone wants. And we need to handle voting properly, otherwise things get confusing. There are certain requirements for voting. First of all, there's the majority. Most votes require a majority. Every vote requires at least a majority, and that includes elections. And so, and that's something that people don't always understand, but every vote does require at least a majority. Now, the majority is one more than half the number of members who voted. It's not the number of people who are there. It's not the number of people who are a member of the church. It's the number of people who vote. And so if there are people that don't vote on a particular issue, then you don't count them in that, in determining if there's a majority. If 3 people vote and 2 people, you may have 100 people there, but all 3 people vote. If they're whichever way the 2 people voted, that's the way it goes. So you have a majority, meaning that one more than half the number of members there. You have 2/3 vote. So if you reach 2/3, and then that would be the point where you you know that would be the point that the motion is adopted. Um, there are various motions that require at least 2/3. So you have a motion to amend something previously adopted. If notice hasn't been given in less than half, and then 2/3 is less than half the membership. A motion to the amendment of something previously adopted. It's actually a common motion that the people, people don't necessarily know it named that way. You know, people who are reading Robert's Rules of Order will recognize that terminology. People don't normally get up and say, I want to amend something previously adopted. Instead, they'll say something like, I make a motion that we amend the Constitution. And of course, they'll have to give specifics on how they want to amend that. But the Constitution recently is previously adopted. Even a standing rule, there may be a motion or there may be an adopted motion on how to allocate use of classrooms or something like that. And somebody wants to change that. And so there's something that's there. So there's a standing rule on how to do that. And someone makes a motion. Well, it's a motion to amend something that's previously adopted. If there hasn't been notice given, then during the motion's in order during a regular business meeting without notice being given of that. But because notice hasn't been given, then that would need to be, it would require a 2/3 vote. If it's been announced that motion is going to be made, then you'd only need a majority. But there is this statement about when that's less than half the membership. The actual rule on the motion to amend something previously adopted, it's actually the lesser of either 2/3 vote or half the membership. So if you can get half the membership to agree to this, so you get a majority of the membership. Actually, the lesser of, I think I said that wrong, but it's a lesser of 2/3 vote or a majority of the membership. So if you can get more than half the membership to agree to it, even though you don't have a 2/3 vote of the people there, the motion could be approved as long as, of course, it would still have to be a majority. I think of if there were of the people there, but you would require the 2/3 vote. Now, if you don't have, a lot of times you're not going to have even half the membership there, so especially in a church, so you would generally go with the 2/3 vote for the motion to amend something previously adopted. Another motion that requires 2/3 vote is the motion to suspend the rules. A lot of times there'll be some rule that prevents you from doing something, and people say, I make a motion that we suspend the rules and we do such and such. So because this would suspend the rules, you would vote on the motion, and it would require a 2/3 vote to do the action that would normally be against the rules. Now, certain things you can't do. You can't do things that would, if there's rules in place that protect absentee members, you cannot suspend those. And so even if you had a motion to suspend the rules, it would be null and void, and could, in a future point of order, could bring it up and say, this motion was out of order. And so those absentee members could bring that up and identify it as something that should be null and void. And so you definitely should not be allowing a motion that would suspend rules that would protect absentee members. You can't suspend the Constitution. Anything that's in the Constitution, you have to abide by that. You can suspend rules that are in just standing orders, but things that are in the Constitution you cannot, unless it's a case where it's something like something in the rules of order. If it's in the Constitution and it appears to be a special rule of order of some kind, those you could suspend, but those would be a special case. And then rules of order, as long as they're not there to protect the absentee members, you can suspend those with a 2/3 vote. Any motion that's to limit or end debate requires a 2/3 vote. Also, the one to end nominations would require a 2/3 vote, which is a very similar thing. So, and then the motion to discharge a committee. If you refer to something to a committee, it requires a 2/3 vote to take it back from the committee. Now this is kind of along the lines of amending something previously adopted, but it's a special case where you pass something to a committee, you define something that a committee is supposed to do. Really, anything related to the committee should be going to the committee. If you have there's certain things that should be going to the committee, and you decide, well, you actually want to take this back. Well, you have to have a 2/3 vote to get that back. Then there's the requirement for a majority of entire church membership, and I've already discussed this being something that's required for amending something previously adopted when notice hasn't been given. So if notice has been given that something's that is to be discussed at that business meeting, then it only requires a majority, because everyone has the opportunity in that situation to attend the meeting and state their case and to vote on it. But in order to protect those that were unaware that something that is on the book, unaware that something's going to be handled that's on the books already, we want to protect those. So that would require more than just a majority. Then we look at voting by unanimous consent. Unanimous consent helps to move business more quickly. There are some things that it's really just more effective for the moderator to suggest something, and then even to say, if no one objects, then we'll do that. It's usually going to be minor things. It should be minor things. It shouldn't be something that people would have a big objection to, and effectively the moderator making a motion, which normally a moderator would not make a motion, but then asking only for those against it to speak. Sometimes someone might make a motion and moderator might go ahead and say, well, by unanimous consent, or if no one objects, we will do that. It's things like, someone may want to reword a motion, and it seems obvious that it should be reworded in that way. Maybe someone make a motion and realize he misspoke, so the motion's on the floor. The person made a motion and realized at that point that he didn't say what he intended to say. He wants to change his motion, and some moderator might say, if there's no objection, we'll amend the motion. He'll then listen for someone to say, I object, and most of the time you wouldn't expect someone to object to that situation. And if no one does, then he'll state the motion as the person who made the motion intended. And here again, as I said before, it's important to state the motion so people know what the motion they're voting on is. So now the motion's been amended, and moderator's actually stating it as it's been amended, even though it was done with unanimous consent. Unanimous consent works well, and the outcome is fairly obvious. If it's not obvious, then we should be asking people to vote rather than using unanimous consent. Then we look at when the moderator votes. Most people understand that the moderator doesn't vote most of the time. A lot of people assume that the moderator can't vote. Now this is actually not true. Every member, including the moderator, has the right to vote. And that also includes parliamentarian, even though along with the moderator, the parliamentarian normally should not be voting. Because the point here, the issue here is the moderator should be trying to maintain an appearance of impartiality. And so by voting, it makes it look like he's siding with one side or the other. And so it needs to be clear. I mean, even though he's going to have an opinion, and especially when you're talking about the moderator being the pastor, the pastor has an opinion about a lot of this stuff, and we expect the pastor to have an opinion. And of course, as I stated earlier on in one of the other videos, there's an argument to be made for someone other than the pastor being the moderator, for the simple fact that the pastor needs to be able to speak concerning some of these things, and he's not going to be able to maintain that appearance of impartiality when he has a reason to have an opinion about a lot of this stuff, and we actually want his opinion, and yet he's supposed to be maintaining this appearance of impartiality. But the reason the moderator does not vote normally is because of that appearance of impartiality, and so he's one of these members that normally should not vote. There are some members that should not vote in most cases. That does not include committees. Normally on a committee you expect everyone to vote, including the chair. But in a normal business meeting you expect some people will not vote, and you just let it go however it goes. But there are cases where the moderator will vote, and the moderator may vote when there's a secret vote, which would be a ballot. If in that case it doesn't, since the secret voting is not going to impact the impartiality, so he should go ahead and vote as a member. If he's not a member, then he shouldn't be voting anyway, but he should vote in that case. And any other member that's not voting normally, sometimes the clerk won't vote, usually because the clerk's busy doing something, and it just kind of makes more sense for the clerk not to vote. If it comes down to an issue where something's tight, then maybe it makes more sense to have everyone voting. But the moderator should not vote in most cases. But then we get to the case where the moderator, where people realize the moderator votes, and this is when there's a tie vote. And people say, well, if there's a tie vote, the moderator gets to break the tie. In a sense, that's true, but that's not completely true. There's a little bit more nuance to that. The moderator can actually vote in a situation where it matters. So it's not just to break a tie, but he can also vote to cause a tie. But he only gets one vote. It's not a case where he votes and then when there's a tie, he gets to vote again. People seem to think that's the case, and that's not true. It's actually a case where he gets one vote, which he normally would not cast, but if it comes down to an even split, then he may cast his vote if he wants it to. If the votes for motion is 50 and the votes against the motion is 50, then he may cast his vote for the motion. So it would be so it would move forward. And that's what I'm talking about on this next slide. If a motion requires a majority and 50 people vote for it and 50 against, then it lacks a majority, so it fails. If you don't, because majority rules, a tie vote is not, it's not a situation where you can't decide what it is, and so the moderator decides, but rather a tie vote is a failure. So the motion fails in that situation. It requires a majority, so it lacks the majority, and so it fails. If the moderator hasn't voted, then he could vote in favor and it would pass. If he hasn't voted and he votes against it, it doesn't matter, so there's really no reason for him to vote in that situation. If the motion has 50 people for it and 49 people against it, the moderator could use his vote to vote against it, and thereby cause it to fail. So 50 people are for it, it looks like it's going to pass, the moderator doesn't want it to pass, and so it matters what he votes or not, and so he casts his vote with those that are against it, and so what would have been a majority vote for it becomes a vote that lacks a majority, and so the motion would fail. And that's just a case where the moderator gets to cast his vote where it matters. He could technically cast his vote anytime, but at least he has his right to vote that way, but when it doesn't matter, then it's better if he does not. Then we look at the case for elections. Elections are the process of electing people for offices. First, people are nominated for those positions. Nomination may come from a committee or from members. So they would come from the floor. A lot of times, what you would expect if it comes from a committee, which would be the nominating committee, or sometimes other committees are permitted to nominate someone. The proper thing to do there would be to accept nominations from the committee and then to ask for nominations from the floor. And so rather than amending this recommendation from the committee, which is essentially what this is, you would just nominate other people, and so then there would be more than one person nominated. And so then you would hand them as you would any election, no matter whether it came from a committee or whether it came from members. A nomination is a special form of motion to elect a particular person to office. In the case of a committee, it's a recommendation that's made in form of motion. But it is a special form of motion. More than one person can be nominated for a position. The process for voting is used to select the person to serve. So once you have more than, if you have, then we'll look at how we deal with that. First of all, elections when only one person is nominated. This is quite common, actually, especially in churches. You'll have a position that you nominate someone for. Sometimes it's going to be the person that was in that position before, but you have an election every year, so it may be the same person every year, but they get nominated every year, and there's no one else that wants to take the position. Sometimes there's only one person that the people can think of as being someone to serve in that position. Whatever the case, there may be a case where there's only one person nominated. Unless the bylaws require a ballot vote when the person nominated, that person can be declared elected by acclamation. If there's a ballot vote, you cannot elect them by acclamation because a ballot vote allows people to nominate someone else as they're casting their vote. So they could write in someone. So we can't just declare someone elected by acclamation in that case. But if in the case of one person being nominated for a position and it's not by ballot vote, so either by show of hands or some other method of voting, your normal form of voting would you might you might have people that if you're voting on multiple people, you're going to be voting by standing or show of hands so that they can be counted normally. It could be by aye and no, but it's a little bit more difficult to count. But if there's a list of people, then they can all be declared elected at once. A nominated committee may have a long list of people that they're nominating. Unless there's someone else nominated for those positions, you might want to handle that whole list at once. If there's any position that someone wants to nominate someone else for, then you would have to separate those out and handle those separately. But the ones that only have one person nominated, there's really no point in voting on those because there's only one outcome that's possible. So you would go ahead and declare those elected by acclamation. You do not vote to have someone elected by acclamation. I've seen that mistake made that the moderators say, well, is there a motion to elect them by acclamation? That is improper. Acclamation is what the moderator is doing, is just stating that they are elected. Because there's a motion, because someone has nominated them, there's at least one person in favor of them. Because there's no one else nominated, there's no one else that someone can vote for, so they can be declared elected by acclamation. So there's no opportunity to vote against them. So now we look at elections when multiple people are nominated. Here the moderator moves down the list of nominees and asks for those in favor. So this is, you would be looking at one position. So maybe you're electing the clerk the next year. Maybe you have a couple of people nominated, maybe 3 people. And so the moderator moves down that list of people in the order that the nominations have been made and asks for those in favor. The first person to receive a majority of votes is elected. Now, oftentimes what happens is the moderator will name each person and have the church vote on each person. But technically, if the first person gets enough votes to have a majority, there's really no need to ask for the vote on the other 2. So there's 3 people, the first person gets a majority of the people present, then it doesn't matter what the votes are for the other 2, because of that majority, that first person will be receive it. It's going to be elected anyway. So there's really no need to even continue moving down the list. You could go down each one and ask for those in favor, those against. Now that is one way of handling this. It's normally better just to move down the list and ask for those in favor. Anyone who didn't vote in favor, we assume is going to be against. If they vote for someone else, then they are against. The one difficulty there is determining whether there's a majority or not, because there could be some people that don't vote at all. If no one receives a majority, the church must vote again. Now, this is another thing that people don't understand about how to elect officers or to hold elections. A lot of times what happens is, you may have 3 people nominate for a position, the first person gets 40% of the vote. The second person gets maybe 30% of the vote. So, and then maybe the third one gets 30% of the vote. So you've got these three people, and so they get this. The first one gets more than the other two. That does not mean they are elected yet, because they only got 40% of the vote. They do not have a majority. It could be a case where part of those people who voted for one of those other two is willing to switch their vote to that person that has more of the vote. Or it could be a case where after that vote is taken, the people who voted for that first person and gave that person 40% of the vote decide, well, it's not going to be an easy vote, so I'm going to switch my vote. And so some of those may switch the vote to another person, and so one of those people that got 30% may get the majority just by getting some of those votes from the person that got the 40%. So it should not be a case where we take the person with the highest vote over the person who gets the majority. And that's a mistake that I've seen made a lot. But it still needs to be the majority. If they vote again and there's still no majority, what do? You do not start removing people from the list, because you don't know who to remove from the list. Instead, you vote again. And if you still get the same result, you vote again. And if you get the same result, you vote again. Eventually, people are going to get the idea, and they're going to say, we need to change our vote. And so when they start to change the vote, then you'll start, maybe most people will say, well, most of those people that have been voting for one of those two people that were getting 30%, maybe most of those will start saying, well, we might as well vote for the person that got the most votes to begin with. So they will change the vote. Or maybe because you can't get enough people to vote for these, maybe someone will nominate someone else. You can always ask for more nominations before you vote again. You may find someone that isn't on the original list that more people are in favor of. And so, and it could be a case that one of these people on the list asks to be removed. That would be okay too. If they're not going to accept the position once they're elected, then there's no need for them to remain on the list. So they could ask to be removed, making it easier to obtain that majority vote. But whatever the case, you do need to make sure there is a majority for the person who is elected. So it is improper to drop people with the least votes, because the two sides may settle on them as a compromise. And as I stated before, it would be proper to accept nominations for someone else, so that maybe all sides can come together and get someone who gives them a majority. Then I want to spend a little bit of time concerning business and committees. There are some differences in committee meetings from church business meetings, but it is such a similar topic that it is something that we should discuss as well. Because a lot of the people that will be dealing with business meetings in a church are really going to be dealing more with committee meetings, for the simple reason that just because a lot of times it is just the pastor that has to moderate a business meeting, but a lot more people may be called on to serve as the chairperson for a committee. Committee meetings are less formal than church business meetings. Committees don't require minutes. Boards do, but committees don't. Though sometimes committees will take minutes. Sometimes when the committee takes minutes, it's the chairman that takes the minutes. So you don't necessarily have a clerk, but you may have a chairman. We don't normally call committee chairmen moderators in this situation. The moderators are reserved more so for church business meetings. A small committee would, and by small we mean 12 or less. Small committees are less formal. If you have more than 12 people, it gets cumbersome to let people just, there's things you can do in a small committee that, like raising their hand instead of standing to speak. If you have a larger committee, it makes more sense to have people stand up. In a small committee, in a church situation, a lot of times, if it's really small, you may be okay with just people sitting around discussing something for a while. You don't necessarily have to have motions for everything. In a committee, especially a small committee, motions do not require a second. In a large committee, you should require a second because there could be a lot of motions, and you want to limit those so that you're only discussing the things that have a chance of passing. If there's no chance of it passing, then there's no need to discuss it. A vote may be taken in a small committee without a formal motion being made. So you may have a discussion about something, and at some point it's obvious what people want to do, what people want to consider. You discuss this for a while. The chairman may basically just state a motion and say all in favor of, and maybe even all in favor of what we've been discussing sometimes in a small committee. But a formal motion is not required in that case, as long as it's obvious what that is. Now, you do need to be careful that it is obvious what it is you're voting on. But the chairman could ask for people to vote on something without actually having that motion made. The chair in a small committee may debate motions. There's no limitation on that. There's also no limitation on how often or how many times a person can speak to a motion. You don't have that two times to speak limit that exists during a church business meeting. Now, there is a limit on what you can discuss. Committees are limited to the task the church has given them. So if you are on a building committee, you need to be discussing the building. You do not need to be discussing Christian education or the youth department or things like that, to the extent that you could to the extent that it's related to the building, but other than that, you would not be discussing those. You would not be making recommendations concerning what the youth minister should be doing or things like that. So you are limited to the task you've been given. Now, in a Baptist church, a lot of times there will be a committee that tends to have more flexibility. The deacons tend to be able to discuss pretty much everything. If you have an elder board, as some churches do, they would be pretty much allowed to discuss anything. But these other committees, they have a task they've been given. They should remain on task. And so that's the end of what's to be discussed for committees, and that's also the end of this video series on how to conduct business meetings in a Baptist church. I hope it's been helpful. I hope you go listen to the other video series if this is the first one that you've heard. But ideally, you will listen to them in order. I do hope that you will have gotten something out of this.